Frankie knows there are many fighters but few champions, and that his journey is an arduous one, a dangerous one. But as he trains, he carries with him hopes raised by the victories of past and present heroes. Not everyone celebrates boxing, however. The American Medical Association is meeting at a secluded estate. Dr. George Lundberg, editor of their journal, has raised questions about boxing's morality.
I've been a very intense sports fan virtually all my life. I was a substantial fan of boxing for much of my life, and I did a little boxing myself when I was a child. Boxing is simply immoral. It is wrong for a society to promote an activity where one person is deliberately trying to harm the other person. That's simply wrong.
Boxing has often been the subject of criticism because of its savage brutality. But is boxing immoral? And if so, why is it so popular? Perhaps the answer lies in history, in the origin and evolution of boxing, a sport captured long ago in art, literature, and legend. Some historians believe that boxing is nearly as old as man himself. However, the first evidence of boxing as an organized activity is found in the ancient Mediterranean, more than 6,000 years ago. The Greeks held festival games at Olympia and other religious shrines, and boxing was an important part of these games. Leather straps were wrapped tightly around the hands for protection and left severe cuts on an opponent's face. There were no weight classes. Boxers fought to the finish or until one surrendered, but surrender caused great shame.
We have an account of a boxer who, in the course of his fight, received a square blow to the mouth and realized that his opponent had broken out many of his teeth. And so we are told he swallowed his teeth rather than spit them out on the ground and show his opponent that he had managed to connect with him so forcefully. He then went on to win the contest. Another story speaks of a boxer who won a long, grueling, and dangerous contest at Olympia. And when asked afterwards how he had won, he said, by disregarding death. What speaks to me most clearly is an inscription from the island of Thera, which begins, "A boxer's victory is gained in blood." I don't think there's any line that more clearly sums up the nature of the Greek contests.
The Greeks learned to box at school at an early age. The wealthy, having the money and leisure to train, excelled and hired songwriters and poets to proclaim their accomplishments for all to hear.
One of the overriding aspects of Greek life is a desire for glory and for fame and for recognition. And so people would seek after this recognition and immortality that came from victory in the great games.
The Greeks believed victory ennobled them with the heroic qualities of the gods. A true hero was a man who had faced death and prevailed. But there was a more important and practical reason for boxing in ancient times. The Greeks had no standing army, so every male citizen had to be prepared for battle.
The Greek city-states were very often at war with one another, and war was a tough and grueling enterprise. Losing a battle was very serious business. I don't find it surprising at all that Greek males found that a sport as taxing, threatening, frightening, painful as boxing was an adequate preparation for this contest of warfare, which tended to come up with frightening regularity in Greek life. And when Greek citizens watched an outstanding pair of athletes boxing, when the occasional serious injury or indeed death occurred, that they had no particular criticism of the sport, because that death in boxing must have been to them a sort of a sacrifice. And what it seems to symbolize is that capacity to face danger, to meet it with open arms, something which was considered integral to the security of the state.
The association between boxing and war still exists, though not literally. In 1938, the German war machine threatened all of Europe. People were in need of a hero, and Joe Louis prepared to fight Germany's Max Schmeling for the championship of the world.
When you have a Joe Louis and a Max Schmeling, you have all kinds of things that I think, and it might be far-flung, but I think that affected the world and the world we live in and everything else. I think it had great, great meaning. There were two opposing philosophies, two nations that thought different things. And then there was the difference in skin color. And then, of course, with Adolf Hitler asking for victory and Franklin Roosevelt asking for victory. Imagine, can you imagine a sport that would have this kind of a connotation?
One of the largest crowds in boxing history jammed into Yankee Stadium. The fight was scheduled for 15 rounds. Louis, on the right, opened with a furious assault, crushing the Heil Hitler hero in one round, and with him the Nazi doctrine of white supremacy. Fans in the streets were wild with joy, and the results were heralded throughout the world.
Living Dangerously will continue in a moment on...
Mike Tyson on the right is a devastating puncher. He has broken Rocky Marciano's record of 16 straight knockouts beginning his career and has established himself as a serious heavyweight contender because of his awesome power. Frankie, accepting well wishes from friends, must also distinguish himself beginning his career. An amateur champion, he is aggressive and seeming fearless, winning with a flurry of hooks and jabs. But as a pro, people will expect knockouts.
The wars, that's what the people want. Wars. You know, people like wars. They don't want... For me to sell out a place, you gotta have wars. They want, you know, fights. It's like being in the Coliseum, where they all go...
Greece was conquered by the Roman Empire in the 2nd century BC. The Romans changed boxing from a display of skill and endurance to an exhibition of blood and gore. Boxing became an arena activity where Romans satisfied their special taste for the horror of death. The crowd would be warmed up by watching people battling animals, being crucified, and being tortured to death. It had the air of a human slaughterhouse. The leather straps designed to protect the hand were replaced by a weapon-like glove called the cestus. It was forged of iron with 2 large spikes and usually covered with blood and spattered tissue. Rome was a rigidly ordered society, and these games were one way of allowing the emperor to demonstrate his naked power over life and death. But there was also another explanation for the popularity of these games.
Perhaps also it gave the audience a little bit of a good feeling about itself. The audience had watched death take place, but hadn't suffered. Watching other people's misfortune and feeling that in the perilous world of Rome, that the spectator had himself won a victory by not dying as well.
I love the fight. I love the fight. It's either dancing or fight. Tonight there's both. I picked the fight.
It is 6 p.m. Frankie arrives early with his trainer and a close friend for support.
Keep your mouth up. Yeah.
While the fighters are examined and weighed, the ring is made ready for the